They called it the back alley of forgetfulness, a narrow stretch behind a modest restaurant in downtown Atlanta, soaked in the smell of fryer grease and cigarette ash. It was the kind of place no one noticed unless they were the ones being ignored. And Charlie knew that feeling too well. He was in his 30s, a quiet man with a soft face and a pair of tired hands, the kind that had folded more napkins than letters from home. After coming out as gay, his own father hadn't spoken to him again. That silence became a permanent fixture in Charlie's life, louder than any insult, deeper than any scar. He poured his love into food, stirring broth, folding pastry, brushing sauce like paint. Every dish was his way of saying what words no longer could. I'm still here. I'm still trying. Then came the night, the kind of cold that crawled up from the pavement and clung to the bones. As Charlie took out the trash, he saw him. A boy, no older than 10 or 12, thin, wrapped in a hoodie too small for his frame. He was crouched behind the bins, knees tucked to his chest, shivering but silent. No hand reached out, no eyes lifted, no voice asked for anything. The boy didn't beg. He just existed. Charlie stared for a moment. Then without a word, he returned inside. He didn't ask permission, didn't check the books. He simply packed up a portion, warm stew, 2 slices of bread, and a small brownie wrapped in napkin, slipped it into a brown paper bag, and walked back out. He placed it gently on the ground, a few feet away from the boy, and whispered, "Eat well, sweetheart. You're not invisible." He didn't expect thanks, but as he turned to leave, he heard it, the softest crunch of gravel as the boy inched forward, not toward Charlie, but toward the food. The next night, Charlie did the same, and again, and again. He never got a name. The boy never spoke. But he always came, always at dusk, always left nothing behind but the empty bag and a faint nod. Charlie called him Leo, not because he looked like a Leo, but because he survived like one. Quiet, careful, fierce beneath the silence. Charlie started leaving little notes inside the bag, just a line or two, scribbled quickly before his shift. "Hope today is softer. I saved you the corner piece, it's my favorite. If no one says it today, I'm proud of you." He didn't know if the boy read them, but the bags kept disappearing, and that was enough. It became routine. While others counted tips, gossiped in the break room, or ignored the shadows outside, Charlie counted meals packed for a ghost in the alley. But Leo wasn't a ghost. He was real. More real than the friends who stopped calling. More real than the father who slammed the door shut. And every time Charlie saw that hoodie move through the dark, something in him softened. Not healed, not yet, but softened. One night, the boy picked up the bag, then paused. For the first time, he looked up. Just a glance, just a second. But it was the kind of look that said, "I see you too." Charlie went home that night with something more nourishing than food. He'd been feeding a child, but in truth, he'd been feeding hope. And even if he never learned the boy's real name, Charlie knew one thing for certain. The alley was no longer a place people forgot, because somewhere out there, a boy remembered. This was only the beginning. If you believe in quiet acts of kindness, changing lives, stay with us. The alley fed more than one hunger, but not everyone saw it that way. In a world built on assumptions, rumors could spread faster than facts, and far more viciously. Charlie never told anyone about Leo, not out of shame, but protection. The boy never asked for attention, and Charlie respected that silence. Still, silence didn't stop whispers. It started behind the kitchen. First, a joke muttered too loud near the dish pit. Then, 2 servers paused mid-sentence when Charlie entered the break room. Management noticed the unease, or perhaps they simply noticed the way others began stepping away. One afternoon, the restaurant manager called him into the office. The door shut with the soft finality of a trap. "They say you've been sneaking food out the back," the manager said, voice measured but eyes sharp. We won't press charges, but people are talking. Charlie blinked. Talking? They think that you're hiding something back there, or someone. The unspoken word was heavier than the one spoken. Gay, pervert, predator. The labels never changed, only the tone they were delivered in. I just pack leftovers, Charlie said calmly. What people choose to believe says more about them than me. The manager frowned. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong, but image matters here. Be careful. Charlie, people don't forget what they hear, especially when it involves children. That night, Charlie lingered longer in the alley than usual. He didn't want Leo to come, not because he didn't care, but because he feared what might happen if someone saw. But Leo came anyway. Small steps, head down, same hoodie, same silence. Charlie placed the food down with extra caution. No note this time, only his eyes, quietly begging the boy to be careful, to disappear faster. Then he turned to leave, heart heavy. But fate didn't wait. 2 blocks from the restaurant, Charlie was cornered. 3 men, maybe more, faces blurred by the dim streetlight in the haze of cruelty, words thrown like stones. Feeding your little boyfriend again, huh? A shove, a punch, his back against the brick wall, the sound of fists, gravel under his knees, laughter mixed with spit. His wrist cracked hard against the pavement. Something gave. Maybe a bone, maybe something deeper. He didn't fight back. He'd been taught not to. By the world, by his father, by the silence that followed every time he tried to explain who he was. But then, movement. Out of the dark, the boy appeared. Leo, from a trash bin nearby. He burst forward, arms flung around Charlie's bruised frame like a shield, far too small. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The attackers paused. Shock flickered. The smallest boy, silent all these years, had chosen a side. In public, in risk. And then they left, not out of mercy, but because fear, sometimes, wears the face of exposure. Charlie sat trembling on the ground, blood on his sleeve, Leo's arms still around his chest. You shouldn't have done that, Charlie whispered. Leo just held on tighter. Charlie didn't report the assault. No police, no hospital. He wrapped his wrist himself and worked the next day through pain and swelling. When a coworker asked what happened, he simply said, slipped on the stairs. That night, the brown paper bag still sat behind the restaurant. And this time, when Leo reaches for it, Charlie gently placed a hand on his shoulder, not to stop him, but to say, I saw you. I felt you. You're not mine, Charlie murmured, but I'll protect you like you are. In a world that called them both disposable, that moment stitched something permanent, a bond forged in bruises, not from violence, but from choosing to stand in it together. The alley changed after that night. Charlie still brought food, and Leo still came, but something had shifted. Leo no longer hid. He didn't linger either, but when their eyes met, there was recognition now, not fear. Sometimes he would crouch beside the brown bag and open it slowly, as if savoring more than the meal, as if the warmth inside had less to do with stew and more to do with being remembered. Charlie kept writing notes, but now the words grew longer. They carried thoughts, not just comfort, little confessions, memories of music he liked, stories from the kitchen, a secret recipe for apple pie, written in messy pen, sometimes a drawing of the sky he'd seen that morning, or of the owl that lived on the fire escape. Leo still said nothing, still signed nothing. But then, one night, something changed. Charlie stepped out as usual, holding the paper bag in both hands. The air was thick with the smell of summer rain on warm pavement. A storm was coming. But the alley was empty. He waited. 10 minutes, then 15. No Leo. Charlie left the bag anyway, placing it with care, like always. He sat on the steps after his shift that night, staring into the dark, wondering if he had done something wrong, or if life had simply decided the boy had been fed enough kindness. The next day, the bag was gone, but Leo didn't come. Not the day after either, or the week after that. And then silence, until it happened. On the fourth week, behind the restaurant, beneath a loose brick near the dumpster, Charlie found something folded and wedged carefully into the crevice. A note. The handwriting was uneven, like it had taken hours to write. "Thank you. You saved me more than you know. I'll come back someday, stronger." It wasn't signed, but it didn't have to be. Charlie held the paper in his hand for a long time before folding it gently and slipping it into his pocket. That night, he found an old wooden box in his closet, wiped the dust off the lid, and inside it, he placed the note, alongside every other one he had written, kept in secret, never knowing if they had been read. He stopped visiting the alley after that, not because he gave up, but because he understood Leo had made a choice. To go, to grow. Charlie kept working, but the restaurant changed hands within the year. He lost his job with little notice. No severance, no goodbye, just another door closing, one more silence to live with. He found work again, eventually, not in a restaurant, but in a church kitchen, baking bread for morning services, quiet work, not glorious, but honest, the kind of place that welcomed hands, not stories. Years passed. The box of notes moved with him, from apartment to apartment, shelf to drawer. Every now and then he would open it, touch the paper like it held a heartbeat, and remember. Then, one spring morning, 12 years after the last note, Charlie came home to find a thick envelope tucked beneath his door. The paper was cream-colored, heavy, elegant, the kind of invitation that didn't belong to his world anymore. He turned it over. On the back, a handwritten line in familiar, shaky ink. "Please come, seat 12B," from the boy who never forgot. Charlie opened it with trembling fingers. It was a wedding invitation, printed in gold ink and Leonard M. Hale to wed Julian Carter. The ceremony would be held in Colorado. Formal attire. RSVP requested. He sat at the edge of his bed for a long time, staring at the name, Leonard, Leo. The boss had grown into a man, a doctor, a person with a life big enough for gold ink and seat numbers. Charlie didn't cry. He didn't smile either. He just breathed in deeply, like someone remembering how to exist all over again. In the quiet of his apartment, surrounded by old walls and older memories, Charlie whispered aloud, not to the boy, not to the man, but to the name that had never been spoken. "I remember you too." The mountains of Colorado stood tall and still, like they'd been holding their breath for centuries. The resort nestled in their shadow. It was made of polished stone, floor-to-ceiling glass, and quiet wealth. Every surface gleamed. Every flower had been placed, not grown. Charlie felt out of place the second he stepped through the main doors. He wore a navy jacket that didn't quite fit. His shoes were worn, the soles scuffed from years of kitchens and sidewalks. No one greeted him. No one noticed the envelope he clutched, proof that he belonged there, at least in name. Seat 12B, that's what the card said. He followed the ushers through a corridor that smelled faintly of roses and pine, then into a grand room lined with white chairs and chandeliers that looked like falling stars. Guests murmured in soft, expensive voices. Laughter drifted from polished mouths. Charlie didn't recognize anyone. Not a face, not a name, not a single smile meant for him. But when the string quartet began playing, the room shifted, heads turned, the hush of anticipation rolled in like a tide. Then the groom stepped out. He was taller now. The hoodie had been replaced with a tailored gray suit that caught the light like silk. His hair was neat, his posture confident. He moved with the calm of someone who had spent years building a life no one could question. But his eyes, those eyes had not changed. Charlie felt it like a strike to the chest. That quiet, familiar intensity, The same eyes that once peeked up from behind a dumpster. The same eyes that never spoke a word, but always listened. Leo, or rather, Leonard M. and Hale. The officiant cleared his throat. The room fell into complete silence. "Before we begin," he said, "if anyone here objects to this union, speak now or—" But Leo raised a hand, not to stop someone else, to stop himself. He took a breath, then another. The room waited. And then Leo spoke, not to the officiant, not to his groom, but to everyone. "Before today," he began, his voice clear and unwavering, "people have always told me what love should look like." A pause, a shift in the air. They said love is flowers, rings, ceremonies, a house in the right zip code, a last name shared, a future drawn in pencil, not blood. He turned slowly, eyes scanning the crowd until they stopped at one seat near the edge. Charlie sat there, unmoving, unbreathing. "But love, for me, wasn't like that," Leo continued. "Love was a brown paper bag, a folded note with 3 words, a warm meal behind a kitchen no one else saw, a voice that never asked me to speak, only to eat." A rustle in the crowd, curious glances, whispers. Leo pointed. "To that man," he said, "who didn't raise me by blood. He raised me by choosing me. Every day, in silence." Charlie didn't move. He didn't need to. The room had already turned toward him, toward the man no one expected, seated in 12B with scuffed shoes and shaking hands. "He fed me," Leo said. He protected me. He gave me dignity before I knew what the word meant. And even when I ran, he left the bag anyway, just in case I ever came back." A long silence followed. No one filled it. No one dared. Leo turned back to the officiant and gave a small nod. "We can continue," he said quietly. But everyone knew the ceremony had already changed. The air held something heavier now. Not sadness, not joy, but the weight of truth finally spoken. Charlie looked down, unable to hold the tears that had come without permission. They slid down his face silently. Like all the years, he never got to ask if the boy was okay, if he'd made it, if it mattered. Now he knew. From across the aisle, Leo met his gaze again. Not with a smile, but with something deeper. A kind of peace neither of them had ever been offered. The ceremony went on. But in one corner of the room, far from the altar, something far more sacred had already taken place. The reception was polished. Crystal glasses, soft jazz echoing under chandeliers, laughter as smooth as the wine. But for Charlie, it was noise. He stood at the edge of the crowd, alone in a suit that had never seen an evening like this. Servers weaved around him. He didn't eat, didn't drink, just waited. Then, from across the room, Leo caught his eye again. No words, just a slight motion of the head, a silent request. Charlie followed him outside, away from the light and luxury, past the ballroom doors, down a narrow hallway, onto a quiet terrace. The mountains stood in the distance like silent witnesses. They didn't speak for a while. Leo leaned against the railing. The night wind carried the scent of pine and faint snow. Charlie stood beside him, his hands awkwardly folded, unsure where this moment belonged. Then Leo turned, holding a box, old, wooden, familiar. He opened it slowly, revealing a stack of papers, some yellowed, some wrinkled, all with the same careful handwriting. The notes, each one is saved. Charlie's breath caught, and beside them, a photograph. He stared at it, frozen. It was him, young, smiling awkwardly, with an arm around a girl he barely remembered how to miss, his high school girlfriend, the only woman he'd ever loved in the small, confused way he tried to be someone he wasn't. He hadn't seen that picture in decades. "She never told you," Leo said quietly. "Not once." Charlie shook his head. Slowly. She left before I was born. Leo continued. Moved out of state, said she was going to make a new life. But before she died, she left that ed box with my aunt. Said, find the man who wrote those notes. He's your real father. Charlie's knees nearly gave. I never knew, he whispered. I would have looked for you every day, every street, every face. Leo nodded, eyes damp but steady. I believe you. Charlie reached out, his hand trembling as it rested on Leo's shoulder. No longer the shoulder of a lost boy, but of a man he had unknowingly watched become whole. I didn't deserve to be your father, Charlie said. But you were, Leo replied. The wind rustled again. The stars above didn't blink, and still they stood there. Two men, blood finally acknowledged, pain slowly softening. Then Charlie asked a question. It seemed small, almost casual, but it cracked something open. Does she know about the boy in the alley? He didn't need to explain who she was. Leo knew. The groom, the one waiting back inside. Leo looked down. His voice was almost a breath. No, I never told her. I didn't want her to see that part of me. Silence longer than the rest. And in that pause, Leo's face changed, as if the world tilted a degree, and something that had always been hidden, even from himself, came into view. I thought I had to be someone else to deserve love, he said. I thought the man in the alley was someone I had to bury. He looked at Charlie. But I can't marry someone who never met him. Charlie didn't move. He didn't need to. Leo stepped back from the railing. I can't build a life pretending I was never broken or never saved. He turned toward the doors. His steps were sure. Back inside. The music paused. Guests looked up. The groom approached the microphone again, but this time alone. I need to stop this, he said, voice steady. I'm grateful for today, for all of you, but I can't go through with this. Gasps, confusion. Leo continued. There was a boy who lived in silence behind a kitchen. He was bruised, hungry, afraid to speak. I promised I'd never be him again, but I've realized something. He glanced toward the doorway. Charlie stood there, not stepping in, just watching. That boy still needs to be loved. And hiding him means hiding the truth of who I am. He took off the ring, set it gently on the podium. Then, with no explanation to the crowd, no drama or spectacle, he walked away and toward the only man who had ever seen him completely. Charlie didn't ask what would come next. He didn't need a label. All he needed was the name he never got to say out loud. Dad. And this time, Leo didn't correct him. Would you have walked away too? If it meant walking back to who you really are? Tell us in the comments. Your voice may help someone else find their own. Subscribe to Heart Story for more stories that remind us. Sometimes, being seen is the bravest kind of love.